Tantalus was a powerful king, renowned for his wealth and influence, and unlike most mortals, he held a privileged place among the gods. As the son of Zeus and a nymph, he was a demigod, a lineage that set him apart and brought him closer to the divine. This unique status earned him one of the greatest honors any mortal could dream of. Tantalus was invited to dine with the gods on Mount Olympus. Sitting at the table of the Olympians, he was allowed to witness their grandeur firsthand and share in their sacred feasts. At these gatherings, he tasted the gods' ambrosia and nectar, foods that granted the immortals their eternal life and vigor. Yet, rather than humbling him, this favor filled Tantalus with pride. He began to see himself not merely as a guest but as an equal to the gods. His arrogance grew, leading him to believe he could act without fear of divine consequences. This prideful outlook would soon drive Tantalus to actions so reckless that they would forever change his relationship with the gods. Despite the divine favor he enjoyed, Tantalus's gratitude turned into arrogance. The privilege of dining with the gods had made him bold, and he began to push the boundaries of his relationship with them. Rather than showing the respect and humility expected of a mortal in the company of such powerful beings, Tantalus grew increasingly convinced of his own importance. He saw himself not merely as a favored guest but as an equal to the gods themselves. As his pride deepened, Tantalus decided to test the gods' omniscience, their supposed ability to know and see all things. He became curious about just how far he could go in challenging their power without facing any consequences. This sense of impunity led him down a dangerous path, one where he would set traps to try to trick and deceive the very gods who had shown him kindness. Instead of revering their wisdom and authority, he saw it as an opportunity to prove himself superior, a decision that would ultimately seal his tragic fate and bring about his legendary punishment. Tantalus, in a bold act of defiance, stole ambrosia and nectar from the divine table, sacred foods reserved exclusively for the gods to maintain their immortality. Consuming these was a privilege that distinguished the gods from mere mortals, yet Tantalus saw an opportunity to elevate his own standing. Driven by pride, he took these sacred gifts back to his kingdom, intending to flaunt his connection with the divine. Once there, he shared the ambrosia and nectar with his friends and subjects, bestowing upon them what only the gods should possess. By doing this, he hoped to demonstrate his power and importance, showing his people that he was not just their king but a mortal who held sway with the gods. In his mind, this would secure his position and make his name legendary. But Tantalus failed to consider the consequences of his actions. This brazen theft was not merely a display of arrogance, but an insult to the gods themselves. It was a fateful choice that would bring the wrath of Olympus upon him and change his destiny forever. Tantalus, emboldened by his pride, wanted to test the gods' supposed omniscience, their ability to know and see everything. Doubtful that they truly held such power, he devised a dark plan to challenge their divine knowledge. With this in mind, he arranged a lavish banquet in his palace, inviting the gods as his honored guests. Beneath the grand preparations and offerings, however, was a hidden scheme to test their awareness in the most sinister way possible. Tantalus intended to carry out a disturbing act during the feast, one that would reveal whether the gods could truly see all or if he could deceive them. He thought that if he succeeded, he would prove their knowledge was not as boundless as they claimed, and he, a mere mortal, would have outwitted the gods themselves. His intentions were anything but reverent. They were laced with arrogance and disregard for the sacred bond he had with Olympus. Tantalus's plan, however, would only lead him further down a path of unforgivable betrayal and unleash consequences he could never have anticipated. At his banquet, Tantalus committed a shocking and unspeakable crime. In his misguided desire to mock the gods and test their omniscience, he decided to kill his own son, Pelops. In a moment of twisted cruelty, Tantalus murdered the boy and dismembered his body, preparing the pieces to serve as the main course for the gods. Tantalus believed that the gods would not notice the gruesome nature of the food he offered, thinking they would eat without realizing it was human flesh. In his arrogance, he saw this as a way to challenge the gods, believing that by tricking them, he could prove his superiority. He thought the gods' supposed all-knowing nature could be deceived. However, the gods immediately recognized the crime and were horrified by Tantalus's audacity and cruelty. His act was not only a violation of the sacred bond between mortals and gods but also an unforgivable betrayal. The gods responded with wrath, condemning Tantalus to eternal punishment for his horrendous crime, which would haunt him forever. The gods were horrified when they discovered the atrocity Tantalus had committed. As soon as they took their seats at the banquet, they recognized the true nature of the meal. The flesh of Pelops was unmistakable, and they were appalled by Tantalus's cruel act. However, there was one exception, Demeter, who, consumed by grief and distracted by her own sorrow, accidentally tasted a part of the dish. She did not realize the true nature of the food until it was too late. The other gods were enraged by what Tantalus had done. They immediately rejected the meal and turned their wrath on him. In a fury, they condemned Tantalus for his wickedness. His once favored status was shattered, and the gods decided to punish him in the most brutal way. Tantalus was not only stripped of his place among the gods but also condemned to an eternal torment. He would suffer a punishment far worse than death, one that would serve as a lesson to anyone who dared challenge the divine order. To right the terrible wrong committed by Tantalus, the gods decided to bring Pelops back to life. Although the crime was unforgivable, the gods showed mercy and compassion. They used their divine powers to reassemble the pieces of Pelops' dismembered body, restoring him to perfect form. His physical body was returned to its former state, as if nothing had happened, and he was revived with full health. This miraculous act of resurrection demonstrated the gods' ability to correct even the most heinous acts, as well as their mercy in the face of cruelty. Despite Tantalus' monstrous crime, the gods chose to give Pelops a second chance at life. They understood that he had been an innocent victim, and his suffering should not be in vain. Pelops was not only resurrected but also made whole in every sense, his spirit and body cleansed of the tragedy. In this act, the gods revealed their power to give life and the grace to forgive, even when the offense was as horrifying as Tantalus' betrayal. As a consequence of his heinous crimes, the gods condemned Tantalus to an eternal punishment in the Underworld. He was cast into the depths of Tartarus, a place of endless suffering and torment. There, Tantalus was trapped in a lake of crystal-clear water, surrounded by branches laden with fresh, ripe fruits. These delicious fruits hung just above his head, tantalizing him with their proximity, but every time he reached for them, the branches would move further away. Similarly, when Tantalus tried to drink the water from the lake, it would recede, keeping just out of his grasp. No matter how desperate he became, he could never satisfy his thirst or hunger. The relentless torment of seeing and almost reaching for what he most desired became his eternal fate. This cruel and perpetual punishment reflected the nature of his crimes. A man who had abused divine hospitality and tested the gods' omniscience would now endure endless frustration, forever reminded of his arrogance and cruelty. Tantalus's eternal punishment in Tartarus was one of endless, cruel torment. Trapped in a pool of crystal-clear water, he found it impossible to satisfy his thirst. Every time he leaned down to drink, the water would mysteriously recede, slipping farther away just as he was about to reach it. His thirst was never quenched, and the cool relief he sought was always out of reach. Above him, branches laden with ripe, luscious fruit hung low, just within his grasp. But whenever he stretched out his hand to pluck them, the branches would rise higher, keeping the fruit tantalizingly out of reach. His hunger grew unbearable, yet no matter how many times he reached for it, the fruit remained beyond his grasp. This endless cycle of frustration became Tantalus's fate. He was trapped in an eternal state of longing, unable to drink the water or eat the fruit he so desperately desired. Forever tormented by his unfulfilled needs, he would never find relief from his agonizing thirst and hunger. The punishment of Tantalus serves as a powerful symbol of greed, pride, and betrayal toward the gods. His insatiable desire to challenge their power and mock their omniscience led him to commit unforgivable acts. By stealing the divine Ambrosia and Nectar and then attempting to deceive the gods with the murder of his son, Tantalus embodied the destructive nature of unchecked arrogance. His eternal torment, forever denied both food and water, symbolizes the consequences of abusing divine gifts and overstepping the boundaries set by the gods. Tantalus's suffering reflects the Greek belief that those who defy the gods and act out of hubris would inevitably face severe retribution. Through this myth, the Greeks conveyed the dangers of excessive pride and the folly of thinking one can rival the gods. The unending hunger and thirst that Tantalus experienced served as a reminder to all that no mortal could escape divine judgment. It highlighted the necessity of humility and reverence for the gods in the ancient Greek worldview.